If you're not at your current employer anymore, your 401k shouldn't be either. I think a lot of folks move from one job to the next and they just leave those 401ks behind and they think to themselves, that's my retirement plan. Well, I'm here to tell you that 401ks are just pieces of the puzzle. It's not your retirement plan. Because lots of times inside of those 401ks, there's only this many options, maybe 20 to 30 different funds, mutual funds or ETFs. Whereas outside of a 401k, you kind of have the world totally open to you to invest dollars pretty much however you want to. So by leaving those dollars in those current 401k plans, you could potentially be costing yourselves lots of dollars in fees that you're not really getting any value for, and opportunities that maybe you would get if you would have done something different with those 401ks. My name's Kendall Stahl, advisor and partner here at 210 Financial, and today I'm gonna walk you through the different options that you would have with your 401k and why they matter to you. So I had an individual come in recently, and I believe they were 58 or 60 years old, somewhere in there, late 50s, early 60s, and they had been to several different jobs, right, throughout their working career. And they came in and then said, Kendall, we're looking to retire. What should we be doing with all of these 401ks? And I think between the two of them, husband and wife, they had 5 different 401ks kind of scattered all over that they had just left behind, and they were just doing whatever they were doing at that point in time. One of the things that they were communicating to me was like, we kind of lost track of these. It's kind of hard to keep track of all these different accounts. And so a lot of times, not only is it potential fees that maybe you don't need to be paying, or just you're not getting much value for the fees, but it's also simplification and consolidation is something to consider as well. As we walk through these different situations, I'm going to give you 3 to 5 different things that you can do with your 401k depending on your situation. So the first one is you can take what I call a cash distribution. All right, so probably not going to recommend this one very often because what happens is it comes with taxes. So the first option that we have with the 401k is just take it in cash, right? And the problem with that, so I guess the pros and the cons. The pro is, hey, you can take it in cash and you can go spend that money however you want to. But the problem is that if you take that money out and you put it in your bank account, that's going to be considered a taxable event. All right, so we've got a 401k here, and let's say there's $1 million in that 401k. Now the number doesn't really matter, but the point is this: if you take that money out and you put it in to your bank account, in between there, you're gonna have to pay taxes. Now, if there's $1 million in that 401k, you could realistically have to pay 35, 38% in taxes, federal taxes, and potentially even some state tax, depending on what state you're in. And so all of a sudden, you're having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. So most people aren't gonna do that. But I have had a situation where someone came to me and they said, hey, I retired and I took all this money out and I put it in my bank account, and I said, whoa, 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 whoa. Don't you know that that's gonna cost you a lot of money in taxes? And they just didn't know. So the first option is take the money out, put it in your bank account. When you do that though, it's going to come with a big tax bill. You need to make sure that's the right decision for you, and you need to make sure that you understand that's actually going to happen. The number 2 thing that we could be thinking about when it comes to what can we do with our 401ks. So when I think about what the next option would be, the most popular one would be, hey, let's roll that 401k, that old 401k, into your current 401k plan, all right? So number 2 here is we can roll old 401k to our new 401k. So what does that mean? It means, hey, I worked at company ABC and I quit there and I went to company XYZ. Now, you could leave that old 401k where it's at, and it's just gonna sit there and you're not gonna contribute to it anymore, and it's just gonna be invested however it's invested. Nobody's going to be paying attention to it other than hopefully you, but in a lot of cases, you're not really paying attention to it. Life's busy, things happen, we've moved on to the new job, and we just know, hey, there's that 401k out there, and every now and then we'll kind of check into it. All right, so this option is a decent option. It can help you to keep things consolidated. It can help you to stay organized. But like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, inside of a 401k plan, you only have this many options. Whereas outside of a 401k plan, maybe in an IRA, you've kind of got the world available to you when it comes to investing. All right, so what does that even mean? Well, let's think about this. You've got a 401k, and here's a few of the rules with the 401k. First of all, you can't take the money out of that 401k plan until you're 59 and a half years old without penalty. All right, so what does that mean? It means if you're younger than 59 years old and you're still working, all right, that those dollars have to stay in your 401k plan until one of two things happens. Now, this is in almost all cases, but there's a few situations where maybe you have to. So you either turn 59 and a half, then those dollars can be taken out, can be rolled over to an IRA, you have options, right? Or if you no longer work at that company, you are going to have the ability to roll that money to an IRA, take the money out and do whatever you need to do with it, okay? Now, if you're taking money out before 59 and a half, it comes with a 10% penalty. Now, there is one strategy where we could potentially avoid that 10% penalty. All right, so number two is let's keep things consolidated. That's an option. Roll old 401k to new 401k. Now that money in the new 401k is tied up until we're 59 and a half or until we no longer work at that job. All right, it's a decent option, but and I think a lot of people do that, and most people do it in the view of I'm going to consolidate and I'm going to continue to keep these dollars bundled up and moving forward. All right, option number three is what we're going to call a 401k rollover. All right, and this is probably the most common. All right, and so what is a 401k rollover? It's where you take a 401k, all right, and you roll it over. So this is a 401k, and you roll it over to an IRA, all right? Individual retirement account. What does that mean? It means that if you're over 59 and a half, or if you just don't work at that company anymore, no matter what age you are, you can take your old 401k and you can dump it into an IRA, and that's considered a rollover or a transfer, however you want to say it, and that is not a taxable event, all right? And so what does that look like? It looks like, hey, I have a 401k at some sort of an older company, and I no longer work there, and I would like to have more investment options available to me and potentially pay less in fees, or maybe we pay the same in fees, or maybe we pay more in fees, but we're getting more value for what we're doing, all right? So if you like to do things on your own, you could roll that 401k to an IRA, self-directed, and you can invest those dollars however you would like inside of this new IRA that you set up. The other thing that you can do is you can roll that 401k to an IRA, and then you can work with a financial advisor, and they can invest those dollars to do whatever it is you're trying to do, okay? And that's where we can start making those 401ks, instead of just being a piece of your retirement plan or your financial plan, we can start making them really cohesively integrate with the financial plan that you're trying to put together with your financial advisor. When you do that, what happens is the kind of the world of investing sort of opens up to you, because inside of these IRAs, you can invest in a lot of different things than what you could inside of the 401k. So that could mean more growth. It could mean less growth. Maybe you're getting close to retirement, and so you want to get some money out of the 401k, put it in the IRA into some sort of a more conservative investment. Maybe you're still young and you want to be able to go buy individual stocks, right? You can get the money out of the 401k, put it in the IRA, and you can go buy those individual stocks. By doing that 401k rollover to an IRA, that kind of opens the window to you to be able to do a lot of cool things. As always, there's kind of a lot of content in here and some details. I'm gonna consolidate things down and give you the highlights on a one-pager, right? Consolidate them for you so that you can grab it down below and you can take these high-level points and put them to work. The fourth thing that I want to talk about is called a Roth conversion. So when you roll money from a 401k to an IRA, that lets you do Roth conversions. Now, if you've watched my content before, you know that I talk about taxes a lot because I think it's tax planning can move the needle more than anything else in retirement planning. And so traditional 401ks live in what I call a tax deferred bucket, and a Roth IRA lives in what I call tax-free bucket. And a Roth conversion is taking money from this bucket, putting it over here in this bucket, and when we do that, we got to pay taxes, but then once it's over here in a Roth, it all grows tax-free. There's several other videos that I've done that have to do with when you should do a Roth conversion and when you shouldn't, which you can check those out when you're done watching this video. Once you get the money outside of the 401k and you have it over here in an IRA, now that allows you to do this, right? You can convert dollars, and there's some tax planning that can happen there, which could potentially benefit you a ton in the long run. It's not gonna be right for everybody, but that's something to be considering. Typically, you can't do what they call a Roth conversion in a 401k plan. Now, I do think it's something that is going to continue to become more popular and more available as those plans put that ability into the 401k plans, but it's not very common right now. So in most cases, you gotta get the 401k and you gotta get it into an IRA, and then once it's in the IRA, you can take it and you can convert that to a Roth IRA, get some taxes paid now. Well, maybe potentially it makes more sense for you to do that. When we start to think about this, right, as far as what are some of the options that you have, the first option is just take the money out of the 401k, cash, put it in your bank account. When you do that, you're absolutely gonna have to pay taxes. So like, there better be a really good reason for you to do that. In most cases, you aren't gonna want to do that, okay? The second option is let's take the old 401k, put it in the new 401k. This keeps things consolidated nice and neatly. Sometimes that's a really great option, right? Understand what fees you're paying. Are you getting value for those fees? And that may or may not be a great option. Then the third option is, hey, let's take that 401k money, the old 401k, and let's move it to an IRA, open the window of investing up to us, which allows us to invest dollars differently. And that could be bad. That could mean, could be good. It could mean more fees, could mean less fees, could be more conservative investments, more aggressive investments, right? And then fourth, hey, now that we've got it into an IRA, we can do Roth conversions, and that could really benefit us in the long run. The last thing that I'd like to cover with you is what I'm gonna say is number 5 here, and that's what I'm gonna call the rule of 55. All right, now this is super important if you're gonna retire early, okay? Because if we think about it, we've kind of touched on it here in this video, you can't get money out of your 401k until you're 59 and a half years old without penalty. Well, if you're gonna retire early, that potentially could be a big problem for you because you may not have access to dollars without a penalty. So what they have is this thing called a rule of 55. And so this is a really good reason to leave some money in a 401k if you're gonna retire early. Because what the rule of 55 says is that if you're 55 years or older, all right, and you retire or you quit or whatever, you can access the dollars from your most recent 401k without penalty, as long as you're 55. So there's some rules and some things we need to follow there. So don't just go do this alone. Make sure you're checking with your advisor, your tax person, CPA, whoever you work with, and find out if that rule of 55 is right for you. But the rule of 55 is one reason why it could make a lot of sense to leave some money in that 401k. Lots of detail here. I consolidated that down to some bullet points for you, and you can grab that down below. But then also, if you have more questions related around the tax conversation that I had, watch this video here, and it's gonna talk to you about Roth conversions. We'll see you next time.